Promise not to keep you in this sun too long today. I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to thank my colleagues, my senator, my Congress colleagues, all for being here. I'm going to introduce her as the architect of, and the reason that we ultimately got to be here. This is a really, really important day for us. And I am just so proud to stand here with on behalf of the Crown Act and all of my champions to announce the reintroduction of this very important legislation. I'm so grateful to have Dr. Adjua Samoa here with us today. She is the architect and she is the reason that we are able to be at this point because it's her research, her tenacity, her everything that has brought us here. And so I'm grateful for her being here. We're reintroducing the Crown Act for the simple reason that nobody, no worker, no student, no person should ever face discrimination because of how their hair grows out of their head. We can't control the texture of our hair any more than we can control the color of our skin. And yet, Black Americans routinely face discrimination simply because of the way their hair looks. Earlier this year, some of my Congressional Black Caucus colleagues and I had the opportunity to meet with a young man from Texas named Darrell George. For months, Darrell has been denied a high school education because he wears his hair in locks. He'd worn his hair that way for years without an issue, but his family moved to a predominantly white school district, and they decided that his locks were not American enough. But it's clear that the real reason he's been forced to endure this grave injustice is not because his hair violates some unnecessary code of conduct, but because he's a young Black man in an overwhelmingly white school district. Let me tell you, I met him. His locks are beautiful. He's a smart young man. He's a beautiful young Black man. And this experience that he is having is unfortunate and unnecessary. When I met him, I asked his mother if she had seen a difference in her son throughout this ordeal. And she said to me, his spirit has been dampened. But, it's not only kids like Darrell that's facing this discrimination in school. We're also seeing this discrimination in the workplace. And this adds not only trauma and missed opportunities, but it adds economic burdens on our workers. More than 20% of Black women between the ages of 24 and 34 report being sent home from work because of their hair. And Black women's hair is 2 times more likely to be considered unprofessional compared to white women. And many Black women have admitted to simply straightening their hair for an interview for a job. Most of us believe that children of all races and backgrounds should have the freedom to learn, be themselves, and pursue their own dreams and aspirations, whatever they may be. But some politicians would see children like Darrell denied his right to an education in order to fuel divisiveness between our communities. It's up to us to turn that out and to stand up for children and to reject this attempt to divide us. We also need this act because those who want to work for a living in the corporate world have a right to wear their hair any way they want to as well. As long as your hair does not create a hazard for the type of work that you do, and if it does, tie it up and put a net on it, just like we ask waiters and waitresses and food preparation people to do that. We need this act to end this kind of blatant discrimination, which is closing off these opportunities educationally and economically for people who are eminently qualified and ready. Being an American is about accepting the wonderful diversity of this country, and it is knowing that our society is richer, and culturally and spiritually and economically emboldened because of it. Discrimination against Black hair, discrimination against Black people, and we're going to put a stop to it. I'm grateful to the broad coalition that has developed to pass this legislation. I look forward to working with them to ensure everyone can live as their authentic selves. And we've built a strong coalition to pass this bill in the House. As for the Senate, I'm going to leave that work to my fantastic senator, who's capable of doing all things well, Senator Cory Booker.
All right. It is. I am blessed to follow really one of the grand dames of the House of Representatives, but for us in New Jersey, one of our great, extraordinary leaders who has been a leader on this. I cannot tell you. I wish I could show you how many text messages I have on my phone from her about specifically the Crown Act. Her leadership has been indispensable in getting us to this point. She was right, though, when she gave homage to the architect of this work, someone who has inspired me, educated me, and supported our efforts on the Senate side. Adjoa, I just want to say you are heroic, and I celebrate you. I thank God for you, and you are an agent of justice in the most extraordinary way. And you see behind me right now are some of the most distinguished members of the Congressional Black Caucus. It is something that these leaders and the fact that they are here understand the urgency of this moment. We are still in a nation where a tremendous amount of our citizens face this challenge of discrimination based on their hair. In fact, a recent study from Michigan State University found that Black women are 50% more likely to be sent home from the workplace because of their hair, and 80% of Black women feel the need to change their hair from its natural state to fit in at the office. Another study done at Duke University found that Black women with natural hairstyles are less likely to land job interviews than white women or Black women who straighten their hair. This is just wrong. It is a form of discrimination against people because of who they are. And it is an affront to our history and to our culture, to our pride, and to our expression. The Crown Act seeks to address this, to end this discrimination. And to be clear, this is not a partisan issue. The federal government would simply be following the lead of our states. Already 19 states have passed laws that prohibit hair discrimination, including my home state of New Jersey, but also Maine, Alaska, California, Nebraska, Tennessee, and Louisiana. If Tennesseans and Californians can find common ground and agree on this, then we all should be doing something about it. In the United States Senate, we've been able to make this a bipartisan bill. I want to specifically thank Susan Collins for her leadership and willing to stand with us in this effort. This is an issue of justice. This is an issue of fairness. This isn't just an issue of ending discrimination that have existed for too long. Enough is enough. We need to pass this bill. And now I'm proud to bring up the hero who I mentioned earlier, and somebody that she's wearing heels today, so she's a lot taller than I normally look at her. But either way you slice it, I look up to her. Everyone, I bring up Dr. Adjoa Asamoah.
Thank you so much, Senator, and thank you all for being here. And thank you, Congresswoman Watson Coleman, for having me join you all. I truly appreciate you for doing so and for your leadership and partnership. I am Dr. Adjoa B. Asamoah, and I am known as the Crown Act champion as I conceptualize policy change, subsequently develop the nationwide legislative, social impact, and coalition building strategies for this movement and lead it nationally. This movement is a result of a conversation I had with 3 other Black women at Essence Festival in 2018 about the need to tackle the long-standing history of racial discrimination in the form of hair discrimination, specifically against natural hair and protective styles in the workplace, schools, and society at large. They were exploring other ideas, and I deemed this issue requires law change. And I have worked tirelessly since then without pause, including during the pandemic, to do exactly that. Folks, purportedly race-neutral grooming policies that enforce Eurocentric standards of beauty and reinforce myopic notions of what constitutes professional hair are problematic. We know in many ways anti-Blackness is pervasive, and while race, the way we typically discuss it, is a social construct, racism is very real. and it requires a thoughtful and intentional approach to dismantle the rules and practices that reinforce it. And in this case, to mitigate the physical, psychological, and economic harm caused by race-based hair discrimination. This bipartisan policy campaign that I am proud to lead at the local, state, and federal levels is a new model for how to engage civically, working with our elected leaders in a way that is effective, collaborative, and people-powered, because our children, like Darryl George, who I am working with and recently brought to DC, as you mentioned, Congresswoman, where he felt the love and support from everyone. They have been denied what we call FAPE, which is a free and appropriate public education. And our babies need to be in school climates that are nurturing and conducive to them thriving. Now, I will resist the urge to go into my research and the findings of my dissertation on this very topic, which I will do at a briefing later. And instead, I will use my last few moments just to thank a few folks who made this work possible. My long-term mentor and forever president, the Honorable Marcia L. Fudge, modeled for me how to champion policy focused on liberation. Based on what she did when she was chair of the CBC, I knew that this was possible. My dear friend, I call my brother, the Honorable Cedric Richmond, who was the original sponsor in the House. He is the first person I told about my plan to do this well before it had a name or I did anything in any state at all. And he pledged his support while I was still strategizing. Senator Booker, who I simply adore, was the second person I told. And he too literally pledged his support while I was still trying to find the pieces for a plane in order to fly it. I don't know how you do all you do, given all you juggle, but you are always responsive, and I am forever grateful. Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, I want to thank you again for ensuring that this work did not end when Congressman Richmond transitioned. Your partnership makes all the difference. Your passion for this work does not go unnoticed, and I appreciate you in particular for your how. Former California State Senator Holly Mitchell and New York Assemblywoman Tremaine Wright, the first to introduce and pass the bill respectively. The small but mighty team that no longer works on this but did in the beginning, namely my sister Elena Wonka Blanchard, who led on the development of the marketing strategy, which is in part why this is what it is. Tona Boyd, Lisa Seiler Barrett, my fellow architects who I worked closely with to develop the language for this bill that would ultimately be introduced, in addition to others, the many supporters, leaders of the C3 and C7 organizations who said yes when I called them to join a coalition in the very early stages, to the journalists who lift this work, the members, especially of the CBC, chaired by Congressman Horsford, who checks in weekly on the progress, and Darryl George because he cares. Darryl is so grateful for the love. He called me and he said he is so grateful for the love that you all showed him when he was in DC to attend the State of the Union as the guest of the Congressional Black Caucus. I will pause for the folks who make it all happen, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So I'm going to bring before you those of our caucus who've been there from the very beginning with me, at least. And this is someone who was there way before me, is always before me. She's Blee. She speaks for me. She's the Honorable Barbara Lee.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman. I want to just thank you for your relentless advocacy and your brilliant strategy and your bold legislation, and really making sure that the voices of millions of people are being heard here, as well as Audra, who we couldn't have gotten this far, Audra, without you. And thank you so much again for your strategic alliance and for, making democracy work. That's what this is about, okay? And to all of my colleagues, Senator Booker, thank you so much for this bipartisan, bicameral effort with the Crown Act. We got to get this passed this year. We really do. And let me just give you a couple of references just in terms of my personal experience. Understanding race-based hair discrimination is what this is, and it can be prevented with a federal law. But when I was a child, I had long hair and I wore my hair in long braids. Then when I got into college, I wore a big afro. Then when I went into the California legislature, I had really short hair. Then when I came to Congress, I decided, I want spikes. And I wore spikes for at least 10 years. Then I decided, maybe I'll go back to a form of an afro, a more current look. But all along, there were people who said, you don't look like an elected official. Why don't you do your hair right? Why don't you do a professional look? And you know what? I said, I hope you understand that this is me and this is my authentic self, and I'm gonna keep my hair the way I want my hair. And I think that's the point, whether we have hair or don't, short, long, locks, coils, rolls, however, braids, it should be part of a law that allows for authenticity and ending discrimination against people Black people, especially men and women, who want to show up with their authentic self. Black issues can no longer be ignored. We need to pass the Crown Act at the federal level to protect students of color everywhere from having their education disrupted, mind you, by white supremacist dress code policies. And that's what they are. We've seen just last month in West Virginia, a GOP lawmaker rejected efforts to pass a statewide version of the Crown Act. In Texas, where I was born, the extremist state Supreme Court upheld a school suspension of a young man for proudly wearing dreadlocks. And it's not just in the classroom either. One study found that women with curly afros, braids, or twists are often perceived as less professional than Black women with straightened hair, which is fine. But the perceptions that reduce their chances for promotions or raises. This is empirical data. Now, let me tell you, up until 2014, and this is when I got involved in the legislative efforts, or at least thought about a legislative effort, but it wasn't until Adjoa and Congressman Richmond came forth with the Crown Act did this real effort take hold. In 2014, I was in Tennessee, in Memphis, Tennessee, for the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. There on the front page of USA Today was a story about the military and its dress code, prohibiting hairstyles worn by African-American women and other women of color. It was Regulation 671. I came back to Washington, D.C., talked to our chairwoman, Marsha Fudge. I said, Marsha, read this. Now, this is front page USA Today. And so with her leadership, we got every member of the Black Caucus, every female member, to sign a letter to the military. Now, usually it takes 3, 4, 5 months if they answer at all. In 30 days, we received a response. I believe it was from the Army? And said, not only are we going to rescind this policy, we're going to have every single department, if they have a policy that's in place, or if they're circulating a temporary policy or a comment period for a policy such as this, we're going to tell them to rescind it. And they did. But that's what happened in 2017. So fast forward, here we are now. And so I just have to say to Congresswoman Watson Coleman, this has taken a long time coming, but all people deserve to be able to show up as their authentic selves without fear of discrimination. And so I just want to thank you for staying the course and for not backing down and nor giving up.
Now, you know, my belief speaks for me. So I want you to know that every member of the Congressional Black Caucus is an original co-signer of the Crown Act, every single one. Even our colleague, Donald Payne, who's transitioned just recently. I'm going to go out of order a little bit. I want the hair guy to talk, but I can't not ignore, we know who he is. I cannot ignore a champion for civil rights, human rights, and everybody's rights, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, for a few words.
Well, Congresswoman Watson Coleman, you can call me the hair lady if you want to. I can tell you When my children saw me, Senator Booker, coming with a comb, they wanted the Crown Act to be implemented a decade or so ago to make sure, Audra, that they didn't have to deal with any comb that I might have for their hair. And so the Crown Act is long overdue for most children, whoever they are, whatever their background. And so I start the question, whose business is it? Whose business is it when we're now in a world of everyone asking the question, it is my body. Well, it is my hair. It is my body. It is my words. It is my human feeling. It is my definition of who I am. It is my respect. And so I'm here today. I know that it's gotten a little warm, but I'm here today because here we are with another fighting civil rights fight, if you will, to be able to define our body as we so define it. And the reason for that is that they're now using the opposite, and that is not your own civil liberties. They're using the fact that you are now under control of losing civil liberties and losing your civil rights. We have none. And they dare us to exert our civil rights. And so, Congresswoman, the immediate moment of you introducing this legislation, one, I was thinking about the comb and my mother's use of the comb. May you rest in peace, Mom. But then I was thinking about freedom. And so today we stand here for freedom. And we stand here in the name of HR 40, reparations, freedom. We stand here in the name of all of the abuse that we're getting with respect to redistricting and the caucus not being able to define itself, meaning the individuals who have membership as who they are. We are standing here in the name of parents who are being rejected in the hallways of desiring to know about their health care and the gist of their existence. Don't you know, as I say in the church, as I go to my seat, don't you know that this is a test of our mettle? That this is telling us, who are you? Are you worthy? You are not worthy. And I'm so glad to see faces that look just a smidgen younger, Maxwell, than a few of us. Just a smidgen. I can't claim the senator, and I'll always view Congresswoman Watson Coleman as a young thing. A young thing. But what I will say to you is, I view this as in the bowl of the next civil rights fight of the 21st and 22nd century. Get ready, because you will not rest. Audra, you may have thought you did this in the 2000s, plural, but you did this for the 21st and the 22nd century. I am ready for the fight, and that fight must include who I am as a human being in the United States, and as well, who I am in the world. We must introduce this legislation, but I will simply close by saying, as we introduce this legislation, we must just look now to Pennsylvania Avenue, and we must ask the president, because I believe in decorum, we want this bill implemented now. We want an executive order in whatever way you desire it now. We want to have freedom now. We want equality now. And we want all those reparation bills and everything else now. And I want to stand with my sister now. I support her legislation, our legislation, and we are going to be victorious. now.
Thank you. Thank you. So clearly there is broad-based support among our caucus for this important legislation. And there could be so many people here who wanted an opportunity to address you very, very briefly. And you're going to hear some of the same things over and over and over and over again. And so you heard the same things during the civil rights movement. This is part of the civil rights movement. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the hair guy. He had promised me he was going to blow it out. But even not blowing it out, it is a beautiful crown, and he's a beautiful young man.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Congressman Hair Guy. Good to be here. I'm Congressman Maxwell Alejandro Frost, proudly representing Florida's 10th Congressional District in Congress. And I'm thankful to Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman for her leadership in introducing the Crown Act, because for far too long, people in one shape or another have continued to want to go into these systems of white supremacy and oppression, and have deemed it that they want to use their power to say that textured hair is not good enough. And we got to be clear, hair discrimination is in fact racist discrimination, because when only textured hair, curly afros, cornrows, anything other than non-Caucasian hair is called out as unprofessional for work or at school, that's racism. And you can't get a job a lot of times too. As a nation, we should be outraged every time we hear a story of a young person being disciplined at school because of their natural hair. Not only is this important for the official institutions and the way they work, but also the culture of this country. And not just the message it gives to Black and brown kids, but the message it gives to Caucasian kids as well about what's acceptable and what's okay. You know, I struggled with identity my entire life. I was adopted at birth, raised by two parents that don't look like me. My hair growing up, I always had more of a buzz cut. And I remember getting made fun of all the time. My friends, would come up to me, people would come up to me and say, those waves look wrong. I remember going to the barber shop saying, I want to get rid of the waves. I want to get rid of my waves. I want to get rid of it because of that bullying that I was experiencing. That is the direct result, because kids they're not just born that way. It's a direct result of our systems and what it teaches. Again, Black and brown students and young people, but also everybody else. And as someone that struggled with my identity most of my life, I also am someone that came to terms with my Blackness kind of later in my life too. And then I found out that my biological parents are Lebanese, Haitian, and Puerto Rican. Then I got even more confused.
We'll accept you.
But I got to tell you this. The first times in my life where I ever came to terms with my Blackness and being a Black man were the times that I walked into the barbershop and those late nights on YouTube, looking up tutorials on how to take care of my hair. I didn't have that. I love my parents to death, but I didn't have that in my house. I didn't have it in my school. And it was those late nights begging my mom to bring me to Target or a different place, in those sections, looking for the right products, buying all these products, trying to figure it out. Those were the moments that for the first time in my life, I was really proud to be a Black man. And it was because of my hair. And so I'm just proud to be here with such amazing, badass women who are fighting to ensure that we have justice for all of our people. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to be more efficient here. First of all, I want to introduce you to the Congressional Caucus Chairman, Stephen Horsford, who is going to come before you, followed by Representative Ilhan Omar, followed by Representative Ayanna Pressley, and followed by Representative Glenmore. Ta-da!
Hey, everybody. I'm Stephen Horsford from Nevada's 4th District, chair of the Black Caucus. I want to first applaud Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman and Senator Cory Booker for your tremendous leadership as the primary original sponsors of the Crown Act. And you have the 100% support of the CBC and our members to make sure that this bill, this legislation, gets the attention that it needs, and that the people that are impacted by the policy understand that we are fighting for them. Whether it's students like Daryl George, the student in Texas who has been barred from the classroom because of what is on his head instead of what's in his head. Or Black women all over our country that are being forced to change their hair in order to be accepted, whether that's into the workplace or into any other environment. That is wrong and it must end. It's a direct form of racist discrimination and it has to end. And that is what the Crown Act is all about. We need a federal standard because sadly, local and state entities are not doing their part even when laws have been passed. And so these are the priorities that Democrats and members of the Congressional Black Caucus are advocating for as we put people over politics. And again, I want to commend my colleagues who are here today. From the personal stories of Maxwell Frost to everyone else, this is a lived experience and it's time for the Congress to act on the Crown Act. Thank you.
I'm Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, representing Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. Really delighted to be here with Representative Bonnie Watson-Coleman and Cory Booker, Senator Cory Booker. You know, I actually kind of think it is silly that we have to introduce this legislation. It is absurd. The fact that we still are fighting for equality, for justice as Black people in this country, to be seen and respected and regarded as equal human beings is disturbing to me. You know, I'm a mother of 3 beautiful Black children who have been blessed with long, curly hair. I was joking, Max, when you were talking and saying even those with Black parents still struggle in finding the right products because there's still a challenge in having those products be available and be affordable to a lot of people. But it is disturbing in the idea that we have to do this as well, because to consider our beautiful Black hair as unruly, as unprofessional, as undignified is something I reject. I reject the idea that when we put our hair in protective hairstyles, that it is seen as something that you have to worry about in showing up in professional spaces. I reject the idea that our young men and women, as they try to play sports, their coaches are forcing them to cut their dreads. I reject the idea that my children should not feel as beautiful in their beautiful curly hair as every other child feels. And I commend my colleagues in the Minnesota legislature for passing the Crown Act in our state. And it is about time that we passed it on a federal level. So thank you all for your championing this cause. And again, it is sad that we have to do this, but it is about time that we get rid of this stigma that still sticks around in our country.
Amen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say how appreciative I am, although it is hot, but I'm wearing my Black girl sunscreen on my head, so don't worry. I did want to just say I'm so glad that we took the time to tell that history and to give those flowers to Adjoa. You know, I grew up in the church where we learned that when two or more are gathered together in my name, right, divine things happen. And you proved that at Essence Fest, not only divine things happen, but righteous things happen. And so I thank you for being the architect of this necessary legislation, although it is a grave injustice that it is necessary. But that's how you know that you are marginalized and oppressed in this country, when you have to litigate, legislate, agitate, and organize for those things that are a birthright for others. You know, and if you look at this picture, this image up here, it's such a powerful representation of the Crown Act. Each member, you know, fully, authentically, unapologetically showing up as themselves, whether with a 2-strand twist out, or a hijab, or a natural pixie cut, or locks, or a baldy. You know, we deserve to show up in the world fully, authentically, and unapologetically, without fear and without discrimination. I'm so grateful to Senator Booker and Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman for her leadership. I firmly believe we each have to do the work of being better ancestors than descendants, and this is an example of doing exactly that. Finally, I'll say this is not just a matter of banning race-based hair discrimination because we each deserve our own cultural heritage, prideful representation. This is a matter of public health. Because Black folks have disproportionately been denied interviews, promotions, there is a pressure to chemically straighten your hair. And as we learned, myself and Congresswoman Shontel Brown asked the White House, the Federal Drug Administration, to investigate the correlation between formaldehyde and chemical hair relaxers and a growing number of uterine cancer in Black women. This is not only a matter of banning race-based hair discrimination, this is also a matter of the public health. So I wanted to lift that up as well. And then finally, I'm so grateful for the growing momentum across our country. Some 23 states that have now passed the Crown Act locally, including the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Momentum is growing behind this priority. So Congress must follow suit by passing and enforcing the Crown Act to ban race-based hair discrimination once and for all, for every student who has been wrongfully reprimanded, for every employee who has been overlooked for a job or a promotion, for everyone in America who has had their dignity and humanity denied, whether you are a student in the classroom, an employee in the workplace, or the next Supreme Court justice. You belong everywhere exactly as you are. Pass the Crown Act.
Amen. Hi, everybody. I'm Gwen Moore, and I represent the 4th Congressional District of Wisconsin. Since we're out of town, I'm just going to hit it and quit it. You have heard so many people say that this reflects the racial discrimination in our country. And you might say to yourself, oh, come on now, knock it off. But you've heard people with real life experience. I can remember when I ran for Congress in 2004, wanting to keep my hair in the straight hairdo in the summertime, 20 hours a day. I spent more time worrying about my hair than I did for my debate prep. And finally, when I got to Congress in 2005, I remember watching a morning news program that I watched every single day, Don Imus in the morning. And I remember the day that the Rutgers girls team won the NCAA. And while we were all cheering their accomplishments, these beautiful Black women who had achieved this great accomplishment, Don Imus, the late Don Imus, said, they ain't nothing but some nappy-headed garden tools. And that was the day that I decided that I started the journey to lock in my hair, forcing people to recognize me for my talent and my intelligence and my spirit and my drive. And I'm so glad and happy to be nappy. Pass the Crown Act.
So what a way to end. We're going to leave you now because there are votes called. But if you have a question, Dr. Asamoah is here to be able to answer them. Thank you. God bless you, sweetie.
I love you too.
I am happy to answer any questions about the history of the bill. Obviously, the members are the leaders, are lawmakers, but if you have any specific questions about the history or what it covers and does not, I'm happy to answer those. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to put this into context, and nationwide assault on Black history, and there's a lot of legislation at the local and state level to kind of eradicate our history. Can you kind of connect the dots between that movement, that anti-history movement, that anti-Blackness, and kind of the resistance that you've seen as you continue to try to push forward on this bill at the national level? I know you've had a lot of success at the state and local level. The dots between nationwide anti-Blackness movement, our history, also the resistance that you can face due to some ignorance or misunderstanding.
Well, I thank you for that question. I think you answered the question by just reiterating that anti-Blackness is pervasive. Now, my first degree is in Africana Studies, and I am the daughter of a now retired Africana Studies and political science professor. And so I was learning about Black history and political systems of the world for over 4 decades. But again, anti-Blackness is pervasive. And as it relates specifically to our history, people know that there's power in understanding your history. And that's why some people will go to no lengths, no pun intended, to ensure that people don't understand that power. So people have created a very sophisticated and well-funded campaign to rob people of their rights to engage civically and specifically in the form of voting, but also in understanding that history, and that is because it is so powerful. And a people, specifically when people know who they are, they walk taller and they are able to move through the world as if they belong there. And so these culture wars, whether it's about, critical race theory, which is such an advanced academic theoretical framework that most people, including those with doctoral degrees, do not know what it is, to, anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion, we see people who are expressing this anti-Black sentiment. And it's something that when you have a powerful coalition, you are able to move past. And that's particularly and specifically what we've done. I've worked with a number of C3 and C7 organizations, particularly as it relates to creating a Crown Coalition. I didn't go into that history there. Obviously, we had a number of members who had to go vote. But you are talking about Black sororities, Links, National Council of Negro Women, NCBW, but also the American Bar Association and the Anti-Defamation League, Jack and Jill, ABSI, the Black psychologists, and so many others. And so there is number. When you have numbers, you have power, and the coalition is very, very, very powerful. And so I'm happy to have leveraged not only my credibility as someone who has done racial equity work before it was deemed profitable or popular, dating back to when I was in trouble in college, for good trouble, for protesting back in the 90s to present. Coalition is extremely powerful, and I'm happy to lead the coalition of the C3 and C7 organizations that support this legislation.
I'm curious, as we heard multiple members mention, is that there seems to be an increasing number of states that are passing their own Crown Act. It's not the first time we've seen the federal government try to pass the Crown Act. It was stalled in the Senate, the Democratic House had passed it along. But at the same time, when we're looking at some of the states, I know we mentioned Gerald George, and obviously in Texas, they have a Crown Act, and this is what his family was trying to say was being violated at the same time that the school was saying it was not violated. I mean, where do you see what is the responsibility of the federal government in terms of these protections and affecting whether or not states can say, well, our Crown Act doesn't go along with this, so we can tell a student that they can be discriminated against or sit outside of school, or you can't hire that person, things of that nature.
So we never want people to inadvertently discriminate. It is important, however, to note that the Crown Act, which I worked on with my good friend, Representative Retta Bowers and Senator Boris Miles in the state legislature in Texas, passed the bill at the state level. That decision was not a state level decision. So there is a school district level policy that is incompatible with the state law, and that policy, we'll call it, is not only antiquated, it's not rooted in research, it's only supposed to be enforced for boys, not girls. And so we have the ridiculousness of the idea that somehow the length of one's hair is correlated with their ability to be able to be a good citizen or their ability to be able to learn, which is absurd. There is no correlation. I have studied this issue extensively, critically at this point, and there's no correlation between the two. So this conversation about length, we have seen proxies for race be used, in this case, the length. So there is no violation there is no challenge when it comes to the state law. This is a school district level policy that I have full confidence will be overturned when this goes to court. So I'm working with Attorney Booker, who is the lead. Attorney Ben Crump has joined our movement in the state of Texas, and I have no concerns that they will see it our way at the end. It's important just to note that I'm just a strategist and someone who's civically engaged, not a lobbyist, but of course work with so many. And so we have a coalition of attorneys and so on and so forth who will continue to fight to ensure that our students, again, are receiving their faith, because that is something that is federally protected, which is a free and appropriate public education. To the issue of what is happening in Congress, I shared during my remarks that this is a bipartisan effort. That is the case with the national movement. And so I support, obviously, but also believe in our Senate champion, Senator Cory Booker, in addition to Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, to champion their respective efforts in their chambers. And they have the full support of the Crown Coalition, particularly the C3 and C7 organizations, as they work to do so. So strategy wins all day long. Thank you. I appreciate it. Good. Thank you, friend.
Oh,
Thank you. And if you need my info, I'm happy to do it.
absolutely.